You're listening to Ideal Practice, episode number 43. Since we're talking about group practices lately, I thought I would share with you today some of my own experience with growing and managing a very successful group practice, including what I did right and, full disclosure, a few things I didn't. There are a few things I would handle very differently if I were starting out today. And I'm going to share that with you today. That's what we're going to be talking about. And I hope you'll stick around to the end because I have a special opportunity for you that is only available this month. If you're catching this live in the month of February 2023, you're going to want to hear about that too. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Wendy Pitts-Reeves, and with over 2 decades of experience in the private practice world, I've built my 6-figure business while learning a lot of lessons the hard way. This is the first podcast that shows you how to apply the principles of energy, alignment, and strategy to build a practice that is profit-centered, but people-forward. This is the Ideal Practice Podcast. Hey guys, and welcome back. Thank you so much. This is Wendy. I'm so glad you're here with me for another episode of the Ideal Practice Podcast. I just finished doing an interview with one of my former students that was so much fun. We got to talk about her entire journey, her process of where she started when I met her to where she is today, which is a pretty dramatic change. And it's been a lot of fun to watch her. You'll be hearing about that in the future. But I wanted to tell you that, among other things, we talked about how important it was to take action even when something is really scary, even when you aren't quite sure what to do. Because you will find, as an entrepreneur, as a practice owner, as a healer with a mission, that you have to honor the call that you're going to feel inside from time to time to grow, to expand. It's going to happen. And you'll figure out the how along the way. That we almost never know that in the beginning. We just know that we are being called to do something different, something better, something bigger, or just something that's completely, in another lane from where we are right now. And my student was telling me that one of the things that happened along the way for her that she began to notice was that when it was time for her to take that step to the next level, she would often reach a point to where it was more scary not to move forward, not to take action, than it was to just stay where she was. Well, I thought that was really profound because that is essentially where I was when I started my group practice. So let me tell you guys this story. When I started my private practice, it was in the early 90s. I have been here a long time, you guys. I know it. Don't you tease me about that. But when I started my practice, like so many of you, I was just really excited about being able to serve my clients the way I wanted to, about being able to work the hours that I wanted to, or so I thought. I had lots of kind of dreamy thoughts about what it would mean to run a business, but I really knew nothing about it. I'd never taken a business class. Nobody in my family ran a business. The whole concept of business, I had pretty well dissed all the way through college. So I really was pretty much flying blind in the beginning, and I went looking for some help. I went to the library and checked out books. Do y'all remember that idea? That's what we used to do. Yeah. I tried SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. It was like a mentoring coaching group of mostly men who were former CEOs. I tried taking classes and going to training events at my local Chamber of Commerce. I went the places that I knew to go to find information about how do you do this? What do I need to know? What is an LLC? Do I need one? Like all the things. What are quarterly taxes? I've never had to think about that before. What is that? How do I do that? I went looking for information. And what I found was that the business world, at least in my part of the country, was a world of men. Mostly white men, mostly older than me men, and a lot of them came from manufacturing or fairly traditional male-dominated lines of business. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, except that they sure didn't speak my language. They were not the people who were going to understand what a early 30s female social worker needed. I was so intimidated and felt like such a fish out of water, even trying to talk in some of those groups about what I wanted to do, that I quickly realized that there just wasn't much out there to help women who were running a business. And so that was the first big call that struck my heart, where I needed to step up. I became committed to changing that. I wanted to create a way where women could start and run their own successful business. And that was how my original vision for my practice was born. Suddenly it went from this kind of vague idea that was very awkward and very difficult to an idea I couldn't stop thinking about. It suddenly was crystal clear. I had this inspiration, and here's what it was. I thought, dang, you know what I'm going to do? What if I had like a business, like one place where all kinds of different women worked, and they all did their own thing, and they all did something different, but they were all really, really good at it. Like we're talking top of the line in their area. And so that anybody who came to me, I could say, and needed something, I could say, I don't do that, but I know someone who does, and she's right down the hall, and she's fantastic. I strongly recommend her. And in my original vision, I was thinking how cool it would be to have a center of some sort where I had an attorney, a financial planner, a CPA, an educational consultant, a massage therapist, a psychotherapist, all the things. Left brain, right brain, all run by women who were excellent at what they did, who were compassionate, ethical, competent, brilliant, and that were all running their own show, but we were all kind of under the same roof. That was my original vision. And with that, I got to work. I began to look for opportunities to meet people and invite people to join me. I began to talk about that dream out loud. If any of you have heard me talk about the 7-step process I have, that I call it the courage to confidence model for taking action on a big idea and turning it into reality, this is what I was doing. I had a dream. I made a decision, by golly, about what I was going to build, and I began to declare that decision out into the world. I started talking about it. Hey, I'm looking for people who do these things. Do you know anybody? Is this something you might be interested in? One of the things that I learned fairly early on was that attorneys like to work with other attorneys, CPAs like to work with other CPAs. It turned out to be harder than I expected to get that particular mix of people. But I did, from the very beginning, begin to attract other mental health professionals who just did something different than what I did. And in its own way, that original vision came to life and grew. And over the next 2 decades, in the end, it was about 25 years that I ran this place. With the help of lots of other people along the way, I did indeed build a practice, a thriving, diversified group practice that did lots of different things and that served our community in a top-of-the-line way. And there were a lot of things about that were awesome. We developed a reputation for being the go-to resource in my town. Now, keep this in mind, y'all. I live in a small town, 25 to 30,000 people at the base of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That's where we live. And there were a handful of small practices in town, but not really anybody doing anything of consequence. And so from the beginning, I unconsciously, without even realizing what I was doing, began to build a brand and began to establish a therapeutic community in my office of brilliant clinicians who just did really good work, and most of whom who did something very different from what I did. Well, that was awesome. And over the next 20 years or so, that became a real resource for our community. It became a real resource for the clients, the folks who walked in our doors looking for help. And it became a tremendous opportunity for those of us who were lucky enough to be a part of it all. It really was just a beautiful thing. So I wanted to share with you a few things that I got right as I built that practice from the ground up. It was just me. Then I brought on one business partner, and then I brought on a second. And then somebody new moved into town who had the same kind of ideas that I had. And we became the core that launched what became Cove Mountain Counseling. That was the name of the practice that I developed. And over the years, as it grew, we went from a tiny office with 3 people in it that was just like one little suite of an old building in town to a really beautiful 3-story Victorian home that was 100 years old that had been remodeled. And we had the whole building, all the places. It was it really became a thing. And we had, at any one time, at its height, between 10 to 12 providers at any one time. That's honestly about all we could fit into the building. But it was a good thing. And I'm not there anymore. I turned that practice over to a colleague in late 2020 and walked away from it, which was something I actually never thought I could do, but I did. It was one of those ideas that served the purpose for a period of time, and then there was a day when I knew it was time for me to move on. So that also is part of our evolution, right? You hear me say this all the time. We evolve as business owners and as people, and I did too, of course. But I ran that place from the early 90s to 2020. So long time. And there were lots of things, honestly, if I had lots of time to share with you, there are a lot of things I did right. But it occurs to me that there were 3 things in particular that I think, well, maybe 4, but that really contributed to the success of my practice. The first one was that I had that clear vision that I couldn't ignore. And that vision guided every decision I made. Now, especially in the early days, as folks would approach me about joining the practice, there were times when I had to be really careful and diplomatic and strategic about when I invited people to join me and when I did not. Because, remember what I said, I was building a place for women-owned businesses to thrive. And so that guided my decision. And I needed it to be diverse. I needed it to be people who did lots of different things. And they needed to be good at what they did. But that clear vision was like a North Star. It was a guiding light. It was the principle that every single decision I made came down to. If it didn't fit that, we didn't do it, period. And there were a lot of ways that really kept us on the true and narrow path forward, especially in the early days as we were taking shape and taking form and becoming known in the community. That clear vision also gave me the energy and the courage to step out and be seen in the community. It gave me something to talk about. It gave me a passion to share. It gave me a message. It helped me find my voice. And honestly, although I didn't know it back then, that vision was the beginning of my learning how to be a leader. Now, if you told me this at the time, I would have blown you off and laughed. But when I look back on it, that's very much what was happening in those days, and the vision was a key part of it. A second thing that I did right back then was I think instinctively in many ways, and partly through my professional training, I knew how to create and cultivate a sense of community. And from the beginning, I knew what a traditional group practice was like. You come in, you pay your rent or whatever, you see your people, you go home. Mostly you're renting office space one way or another. I never, ever wanted that. From the beginning, I wanted this to feel like a community of colleagues who cared about each other, respected each other, enjoyed each other, liked each other. And that sense of connection, it was just really important to me because that's just how I am. I just like that. I like that here with you. I want that to be part of my relationship with you, honestly. I'm a Cancer. We are very heart-centered people. And I just couldn't work in a place where I didn't feel like everybody there was one of my best friends. That's just kind of how I am. So from the beginning, I instinctively implemented a certain amount of structure that helped make sure that sense of community grew. For example, once a month, we would hold an in-house meeting that everyone came to on a Tuesday morning for a couple of hours. That would always involve lunch. Because it's always good if you feed people. If you feed people, they will show up, y'all. There's a little side tip for you. And I couldn't require people to come, but I strongly encouraged it. That gave us a chance to connect with each other. How are y'all doing? How's your business going? How's life? How are the kids? How are you? And to talk about what was going on in our business as well. So it was a practical, strategic, but also personal way to connect. We did that. Once a year, we held a retreat where we would go off-site, where we would spend an entire day working together in sort of a combination of visioning, connecting, recommitting to the vision that we each were building for ourselves, and recommitting to the practice that we were creating together. We would do a retreat, an all-day retreat, and spend the night up there and just have a blast at that. And then there were little things like making sure there was always chocolate in the kitchen, because in a building full of women, there must be chocolate. And that if I didn't have a client, my door was open. And people could just drop in and say hi. And I would holler at folks out in the hall. Hey, you, I hear you out there. How you doing? It was not unusual that one of our providers would just drop into my office and close the door and sit there and have a good cry about something that was going on in their lives or in their work. Like, it was that kind of a place. So I loved all that. And I stayed committed to that sense of community all the way through. I cared a lot about those people, and they knew it, and they cared about me, and I knew it. And of course, that influenced the feeling in the building, the energy among us as a group, and the energy that we put out into the world. People often said that they just felt good, even in our waiting room. Like the energy in the building was just good. There were a lot of ways that showed up over time. So that was the second thing that I did right, was creating and cultivating a sense of shared community and making sure that I protected that all the way through, which is not always easy. It was a little bit like herding cats sometime to get them together. But oh my gosh, what a difference it made when we did. And they repeatedly would say to me, you know, I didn't think I had time to come to this, but I'm so glad I did. It's so good to see you all. The third thing that I feel like I did right in particular, that's sort of related to that, was that I always made sure that I was bringing in, quote, the right people, unquote. And I realize that can be a loaded phrase, but let me say what I mean by that. From the beginning, I made sure to join forces with and invite connection with business partners who were freaking brilliant clinicians in their own right. They were experienced, competent, ethical people who were really good at what they did. But they were also business-minded. They were also people with a certain amount of ambition, with drive, with big ideas of their own, and who joined me in the vision of what I wanted to create. That was huge. Now, in the latter years, I didn't have a business partner because, people came and went over time. And eventually, I got to where I didn't feel like I needed to have that anymore. But having those people in my life in the early days had a lot to do with my own sense of confidence and my own growth. And I think it helped all of us. But we were also very particular about who we invited to join the practice. And this was never a top-down decision. It was a decision that we made as a group. And although it was a little loose in the early days, over time, it became quite a structured process. We had a whole way that we went about this of evaluating whether or not somebody was a good fit to join us. And there were certain things that we looked for, like clinical skill and competence and a sense of integrity, but also having a big open heart and also being someone who understood that if they were with us, they were part of a community, and that was a shared and mutual responsibility that we all carried, right? Well, the end result, what that did over time was it meant that we got a reputation for being a top-notch place to get help. It meant that when doctors or teachers or other professionals in the community had somebody to refer, they would often say to the clients, they would say, "I don't care who you see, just go see somebody at Cove Mountain," which to me is the highest compliment of all. It meant that we were trusted as a group, and I love that. The end result of paying attention to who we were also meant not just that we had a great reputation among providers or that we had a great reputation among the public, because we did, but it also meant that it was just great for us. We were happy. We loved each other. We cared about each other. And it doesn't mean that there weren't, of course, in any group of people, problems pop up. There are issues that come up from time to time. But we were always able to handle those issues with integrity and compassion and to find our way forward, because that's who we were. We were problem solvers. We were forward thinkers. And I would say one last thing. This is kind of like a little extra here. We also always came from a place of abundance. So that honestly is a fourth thing that we did right. From the beginning, we never worried about things like competition or about making sure we had enough clients or about whether there was going to be enough money. I think this way. And those who joined me, fortunately, thought the same way I did. I like that. Of course I do. It's great when everybody thinks the way I do. I don't believe in competition. There are a lot of hurting people out there. There's a lot of need for the help that we bring to the table. And so we believed that it didn't matter where you got help as long as you got what you needed, and we made sure that people got what they needed, whether that was with me or with somebody else in the office or somebody else in another town. Didn't matter to us. So that combination of a clear vision, a really strong and actively, intentionally cultivated sense of community, and having the right people in the mix who shared in that vision, shared in that sense of community, all that plus an abundant mindset. Well, that just did a lot of good things, y'all. And if I had to do over again, I would do all of those things exactly like that. And I honestly think that those principles set us apart in a way. And I feel like those principles made our practice a little different from a typical group practice. And by that, I don't mean anything negative. I just mean a typical business. You know what I'm talking about, the sort of standard kind of idea of a business. Now, that said, I also owe it to you to tell you what I now look back and see what I think were mistakes, places where I missed something, places where perhaps I didn't see things as the way I should have. And there are a lot of reasons for these, but when I think about it, there were at least 3 things that I would do probably very differently from the start. And that is, I'll tell you the first one, because I just didn't know any better. But I would build in the concept of profit from the start. Here's one of the biggest mistakes I made. There's a reason why I preach this to you guys all the time. I talk about money, even though I know we don't care about money, because I didn't care about money. And that was a mistake. And I'm sure many of you can relate to this. From the beginning, I would say the same kind of things I hear so many of you saying. I don't care about money. I just want to make enough to make ends meet. I just want to make enough to, take care of my family. I just care about helping women run a business. That's good for them. I care about providing a top quality service to the people of my town. I care about having a practice that does good work. I don't care about all that money stuff. That was a mistake, y'all. as the founder of that practice, essentially what I did was I created what some might call a co-op model. Some people call it a renter's model. I've already explained why it was really more than just that. But we essentially, everybody paid a certain amount, and there were lots of ways that I figured all that out that went into the running of the practice. And I did make money from it, but nowhere near what I could have if I had understood the concept of profit from the beginning. And there are actually some choices about how I might have structured the business model differently. I can even today, with the experience that I have today, I can even see how I could have kept the model that I had, but still structured it a little bit in a way that would have made sure, by golly, that I was making more money, because the amount of work that I put into this was not adequately matched by the amount of profit that I got out of it. And that's my fault. That's totally my fault, because I wasn't thinking about that. I was not profit-centered, people forward. So I learned from that, and I would do that differently today. The second thing that I would do differently today is I would hire some kind of administrative help from the very beginning, even if it was just somebody like 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week. Whether it was they were at home or in my office or whatever, I would hire somebody from the very beginning so that I had help developing my systems from the start, and so that I had someone who would grow with me from the start. In last week's episode, you may have heard, if you didn't hear that, you've got to go hear this. Amanda Landry was talking about the mega group practice that she's developed in South Florida. And she mentioned this as one of the things that she felt like she did right in the beginning, was she had help when it was just her in a solo practice, a teeny tiny little baby practice. She still had administrative help from the start. I wish I had done that. At the time, I thought I could handle everything myself. And I didn't think I could afford to hire any help. It was years before I did that. Well, I can tell you right now, I would have lost less money if I had spent more money this way from the beginning. Let me repeat that. I would have lost less money in the early days of my practice if I had spent more money by hiring the right kind of help from the start. Bare minimum, a few hours a week, some kind of administrative support. I'd also say I wish I had hired a coach early on, but coaches weren't around back then. That wasn't a thing. If I was starting a practice today, I would, by golly, find a way to get into a course, into a mastermind, or hire a coach so that you weren't figuring all this out from the beginning. But I absolutely would have hired some kind of administrative help from the start. And that person would have grown with me. The systems would have grown with me. That would have enabled success much, much earlier. And like I said, I would have lost less money. And then the third thing I would do differently if I was starting over, and this was honestly one of my biggest regrets, and it's kind of a silly one, or it's not silly. I'm not going to say that. If I had it to do over again, I would have bought the building that I was in. So I mentioned to you that we ended up in a 3-story Victorian home, a beautiful, beautiful home with wraparound porches and fireplaces and high ceilings and chandeliers. It was really pretty. And I had no interest in owning that early on. And honestly, my business partners wouldn't have had any interest in that either. But as my own understanding of what it takes to run a successful practice has grown, there did come a day when I thought, I need to own this building. I need to buy this place. And I did offer to buy it from the landlord that I had. And the landlord was a sweet older woman who I'd worked with for years, who I had a great relationship with. But when I asked to buy the building, or if she would be interested in that, she declined. And I don't blame her. She had a really stable group of renters. Why would she want to sell? And that was a mistake. That was a painful mistake that I look back on now and really wish I had handled that differently. Buying some kind of a building, buying a condo, putting some kind of real estate in place early on gives you an asset that you're going to be glad you've got. Now, there's lots of factors that go into that. I'm not a realtor. Don't challenge me about all that. There's always a time and a place for that kind of thing to happen, I know. But if it's doable, if I was starting today, I would look for a place to buy. so that I had a place to sell later for that thing. So those are some of the things. So, the things I did right, that clear vision, creating a sense of community, making sure I surrounded myself with people who shared in that vision and that sense of community. All of that was important to my success. But I would make sure I paid attention to profit. Also, I didn't say this, but not only would I do that, but I would start the practice with an idea that one day I might sell it. From the beginning, I would have bought the building and I would have built the practice with an idea that someday I would sell it. Those are some of the biggest lessons that I've learned over time. I could probably go on much longer with a whole lot more, but those are some of the biggies. So, how about you? If you are in the middle or the early stages of building a group practice, I'd love to know if you can relate to any of this. And I'd like to hear from you. What do you feel like you are getting right from the start? What do you feel like isn't quite working and could use a little help? I'd love to hear about that. Shoot me an email or a DM on Facebook and tell me, because I love hearing from you. I learn from you as well. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope this helps some of you avoid some of the mistakes I made, and perhaps some of you will do a few things differently because of what I got right. I hope that's helpful. That's what I've got. I hope you all have a great week, everyone, and I will see you next time here on the Ideal Practice Podcast. Bye now. Hey, y'all, before we bring this episode to a close, let me tell you about something special that's happening over here at Ideal Practice. If you're catching this episode when it's new, when it's fresh, you will want to hear this. From February 13 through the 27th of this year, 2023, I'm joining my friend Michelle Knox at Lone Red & Co. in her super cool event that she's calling the Show Your Business Some Love giveaway. Michelle is a dear friend and a longtime business ally. She is the artist and the visionary behind my own visual branding and behind some of the coolest brands out there in the small business space. She's really, really talented. Michelle is pulling together a small, select group of businesses and business supporters, each of whom are offering a special resource just for these 2 weeks that is specifically designed to help you move your business forward. Now, y'all, these are things that you would normally have to pay for, but for these 2 weeks only, you can get for free. And I'm honored to be a part of that group. So, for a very limited time, you too can get a chance to show your practice a little love with some extra help from me. To get there, go to her website, which is www.lonered.com/love giveaway. lonered.com/love giveaway. That's LONERED. And I will certainly have that in the show notes below. When you get there, you will find a select group of helpful resources, all available to you for free for these 2 weeks. Download the ones you're interested in. Take what you want, ignore the rest. But look for mine there on that page. When you click on that link on that page, you will be invited to download your free copy of the IP360 scorecard. Now, this is a tool I've created that helps you get a bird's eye view of your practice, one that will help you quickly assess where you're doing just fine, where you're solid, and where you have some room to do a little work or to grow. This may be familiar to you guys because I offer this all the time. But here's the fun part. For anyone who downloads that link from Michelle's page from February the 13th through the 27th of 2023, you will be automatically given a free, personalized, one-on-one 30-minute strategy call with me. We'll take a look at your scores together. We'll talk through what they mean, and I'll help you evaluate and brainstorm around what strategies might make the best sense for your practice to move you to the next level. Now, I'm just going to ask you guys as a common courtesy, if you are one of my former clients, you're someone that we have already done this kind of thing together, I'm going to ask you not to take advantage of this. I specifically want this to be for those of you that are new to the work, new to this idea, who haven't had the benefit of coaching before. So I just don't have the bandwidth to offer it to everybody that I've worked with in the past. So I hope you'll understand that and help me out with that. But if this is brand new to you and you'd like a chance to get perhaps the first time ever a little coaching around your practice, then I encourage you to do this, because this is an opportunity that I would normally charge for. Again, go to www.lonered, LONERED, lonered.com/love giveaway. Look for my name there, follow the prompts, and soon I will be reaching out to you to schedule your free 30-minute strategy call. And I can't wait. I want to hear about your business. I want to know what you're up to. And I would love to talk about what you can do with it next. Have an awesome week, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.